Yeah, yeah, we're gonna leave that one on. It's kind of might be fun.
I'm pretty excited about this talk. So we actually just started doing some iOS work here, and
Yeah,
we use Earl Grey for testing.
yeah, that's
So I
what
was interested to see what this looks like in React Native.
it's very similar from what I gather, because I don't do anything native, but from the documentation, they basically just mirrored all the API into JavaScript. Yeah,
It's really cool that you can do it on both.
yeah, which is like great for um, yeah. So you guys are doing native, like Objective C, Swift.
Yeah, so we're doing Swift, and then we also have an Android app too. We've been using Espresso, so we're pretty much covered
Same.
everything we need.
You didn't not React Native?
So it's they're actually our client is Kroger, and they use.
They're not into React Native yet.
There was some pushback against using React Native there, so unfortunately,
Interesting.
their web app is React. So
Yeah.
it just seems like it would make sense, but
Maybe they'll move away from the two code bases.
there's definitely been some push towards it from the web developers.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But then there's been pushback from that actually native developers. You should do all this stuff in native code.
Oh, of course they'll say that. Honestly, you can use both. You know, a lot of times you have to. If there's things that React Native doesn't do well, you can just go native. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well,
we're about ready to get started.
yeah.
I'll do a quick introduction and then. All right, so thank you all for coming today. So this is CinciJS. Today we have Gerard Sichait talking about automated React Native testing with Detox. So super excited about this talk. So before we get started, so we generally go around and ask everyone for a brief self-introduction with one question. So today the question is going to be, so what are you interested in learning about in the JS community right now? So I'm kind of super excited about Reason ML. If you've never heard of that, it's a pretty cool language to look into that compiles down into JavaScript. And I'm Zach. I work here at Gaslight. So let's get started from over here.
Brian Kramer. I work with Great American. Currently interested in GraphQL and been working with Gatsby a little bit.
Hey, I'm James. I work at Great American too. I don't know much about JavaScript, so anything really.
Hey, my name's Ben Swanson. I work at the Fifth Third building down the street. I'm interested in learning Angular, mostly because I was handed a team that's doing all that, and I didn't know anything about it before this.
Hello, I'm Brian. I work here at Gaslight, and I've been interested in GLSL lately, just starting with that, not actually JavaScript related. Okay.
Hey, my name is Mark. I'm an apprentice at Gaslight, working for Kroger. I've been learning a lot about Redux, and that's the thing I'm interested in learning about too.
I'm Eric Ansbach, studying to be a software developer and studying JavaScript right now. Looking forward to learning the frameworks like Angular and React.
I'm Ryan. I am currently on the hunt, and I just discovered that you can use JavaScript kernels in Jupyter notebooks.
My name is Lauren Lawson. I do front end at Alchemy, and the thing that I'm most interested in is React.
I'm Gabe, also from Alchemy. Mostly interested in automated testing.
I'm Andy, also from Alchemy, and just kind of interested in testing in general.
Hi, I'm Rick. I just finished a boot camp at Tech Elevators, so I'm just starting to get out and mingle and meet people and soak in some more information.
I'm Steve. I'm doing the solo thing, consulting. Mostly do Rails, but I like React and testing is always a big thing, so looking forward to this talk.
I'm Scott Hoffman, and I work at Gaslight, and I'm more of a view of the 30,000-foot level of JS and other languages.
I'm Charles, and right now I'm really working a lot more on doing virtual reality and seeing how virtual reality works in the medical community. And so I'm still working a little bit more right now towards using WordPress as a web developer, but I definitely need to step up and writing my own code.
Hi, my name is Luke. Here on the recruiting end of things, but really trying to get a grasp on Angular and JavaScript to better know what to ask for and what to look for when looking for new candidates. So.
I'm Andrea, work with Luke, so also on the recruiting end of things, but my goal is to kind of be the best recruiter and know as much about Java as I possibly can, so I'm here.
I'm Cameron from Snow Commerce, and I'm interested in learning Redux and Vue at the moment.
I'm Jessica Hall with Tech Elevator. I am the Pathway Director. It's a code school, so I kind of help out on the soft skills side, but naturally I've got a kind of interest in technology, and I like to learn as much as I can.
Sorry. Hey, I'm Jimmy. I work here at Gaslight. Done a lot of Ember, React, Redux in the past, but for the first time in a long, long time, I am not focusing on any JavaScript stuff right now, so I'm looking into Elixir. That's it.
All right, well, thank you all very much for those introductions. And without any further ado, let's give it away to Gerard.
Turn that on. All right, thanks. Thanks, Zach. So my name is Gerard Sicha. I'm a web developer with Differential. We do the same thing Gaslight does, only we're across the street. So I don't have any slides today. I apologize. You'll get a bunch of web pages and hopefully some demos. But I have a pretty reasonable agenda in my head, so we'll see how it goes. How many people have done React programming so far? Okay, that's good. How many people have done React Native? Okay, less. That's good. So I think everything I'm going to talk about actually will apply to React Web, except for Detox. So Detox is React Native specific. But that'll come sort of later. So right now, we're working, I mean, this isn't a secret, but we're working on both the iOS and Android native app for Crossroads Church in Oakley. I'm sure if you aren't a member, then you must have heard of them. They're quite a big organization at this point. That just gives some context. I didn't have time to create I was thinking of doing just a sample app that's very generic, but I think it actually might be nice to talk about testing in the context of a real-world app, and this is the real-world app. So very quickly, the Crossroads app is a spiritual fitness app. You can log in, and then it has, does this work? I don't know. And then it has exercise, like meditation exercises you can do daily. It has scripture readings you can do daily. And you can also watch the weekend service. And there's some other things. So that's really all we'll talk about the app itself. Now we will go into testing. So this is a document that I created recently in our repo, trying to get a hold of all the different tests that we have in the Crossroads project. So we have a lot of, this project is relatively old. I think we've been working on it for at least this code base for over 2 years. So we've done a lot of iterations, a lot of experiments to land where we are now. We have some QA stuff. We do have tests on the API. Oh, and by the way, so Crossroads app is a React Native app. I think everyone got that. On the front end, running a GraphQL API on the server. So the server is only an API. There's no UX on the server. And it's built on Meteor, but that's actually not important as far as the API goes. So we have some tests on the API, but I'm not going to talk about those. And we're going to skip to React Native. So when we started Crossroads Anywhere, we had some screens. We said, we need to get a handle on our state. Looked around, hey, Redux, that seems to be pretty big. So we are using Redux for our UX state management. How many people have used Redux or some kind of Flux library? Okay, that's good. If you haven't, it's a lot of stuff. Like, I don't even understand it all myself, even having worked on it. I think just, hear the terms and absorb and stuff that you can look up later. But, because I don't want to go too far into Redux and things like that. But we put in Redux, and we were very idealistic, I think, in our kind of view of it. Redux, so your app UI is a function of your state, right? And if it's a function of your state, if your state is correct, your app must be correct, right? It'll be perfect. So we set about just testing our state changes with these reducer tests. Reducer tests very specifically look at an initial state, which is just a JavaScript object, take in some input, and return you a new state. So here would be an example. So this is actually, I don't know if you can read that. Let me pull in, let me just do, so here's one. It should set the state to be logged in when the user logs in, right? Easy enough. So this is a reducer state. We have some helper functions, but the idea is you have an initial state. You run your reducer with the action, the input, the thing that happened, and then we test the next state to be true. Or we test the next state to be what we expect it to be. So these are fine. These are very easy to write once you get the hang of it. The question is always like, what's the value? Like, are these tests good at catching bugs? And having done this on this project again for 2+ years, they're really not good at catching bugs. They're easy to write. It's nice to run, look, we have 100 tests in our Redux store. They're always green. Why do we have so many bugs? That's kind of where you end up. Because the logic is very simple. You go into a function, you update some fields, you return the function. What we found is that most of our bugs were not related to Redux. So we had to keep going. So we use GraphQL. We're using the Apollo GraphQL client in our app on the front end. After doing this a while, we found that most of our bugs actually fell into two camps. The first being data from Apollo. So a lot of the complexity in a native app, as you might imagine, is fetching data from the database, doing stuff with it, rendering it to screen, accepting an action, mutating the data, sending it to the server, getting a response, updating the data on your client, and then rendering that to the screen. None of that is really captured in Redux, because Redux is kind of is not really about the database. That's debatable, but by and large, that's what we adhere to. We have functions that map Apollo queries to React component props. We have functions that map Apollo query data to Redux data, and vice versa. And we found a lot of the bugs in there. So you kind of step back and say, well, then what test should we be running? Well, why don't we just test those functions? That's kind of where we come in with what I basically call our client-side unit test apps, which is, it's really simple. If you have a function that's complicated, export it and test it. So here's an example. So we have where are we? So this is exactly a function that, like I said, takes data from Apollo and just translates it into a data shape that our component expects. So I have this test data, I have some test props, and I have the expected props. And this whole test has one assertion, which is here. So we have a lot of tests like this, and they're great. I would, if you take, well, one thing you could take away from today is that, you hear about, test your reducers, take snapshot tests, which we do have. Do end-to-end testing, which is what detox is. When you can get really, really far by just saying, hey, this logic is really complicated, let's just extract it and test it. Because, end-to-end testing, front-end testing is really hard to do. So let's keep going. Snapshots. I'll say one thing about another class of tests before we get into detox. So when you hear about React testing, you hear about component testing. It's like, how do I drive this component? How do I know that when I click this button, this label appears, or this label disappears, or this accordion drops down, et cetera, et cetera. So enzyme, right? Has anyone heard of enzyme or used it? Okay, not that many. So when we talk about, I'll actually have a test here. Value change. Where's the button click? Let me find button click. Okay, simulate press. So this is an enzyme test. It's not in our client app. This is just a kind of like a example app. So React testing, when people talk about it, a lot of them are saying, enzyme will come up. Enzyme is a library, like a test runner that lets you say, to mount a component like in a JS DOM or some kind of virtual DOM, and say, select this button, click it or tap it, and then find out if the state of this, something happened on screen. So like in this test, we have this add to do. We just find the text input. We type in the input milk. We simulate a press on the button, and we're testing that some callback is called. If you've done like browser testing, like Selenium testing or WebDriver testing, it kind of feels similar. Only instead of CSS selectors, we're doing this enzyme sort of own selection API. And then a lot of the rest is the same, mocking out callbacks, stubbing classes, things like that. These are really popular. In fact, they're probably more popular than the other tests I've talked about. I tried really hard to get this going in our app, and it just did not stick. And the reason is, there's a couple reasons that they just did not help. One is that they're really brittle. So when you're selecting things by label, like find the button that says submit and click it, those things tend to change a lot in a rapidly changing app. The button moves, the label changes, goes to a different component as you kind of break things down. So we're finding it took a lot of maintenance. The second problem is going back to what I said earlier, is this test good at catching bugs? And the answer I found was really, not really. The problem with enzyme is that your component, at least our components, again, the complexity lay outside the component. So yeah, I can test if I push this button, this thing happens. It really is not going to fail a lot of times. So what we found was the bugs in our component lay in, again, the Apollo data and in the Redux data. So what we found is that in order to take advantage of an enzyme, we had to wrap it. Take a look at this. So we'd have to wrap it in a fake Redux provider. or a real Redux provider, and then a fake Apollo provider, or even a real Apollo provider. It's very tricky to test these props wrapped up inside of these other things. This is an example of one test would actually kind of achieve that. This bullet list component was really simple. It was a list, and when you tap show more, the list would expand. For some reason, that open close state was stored in Redux, which we wouldn't do anymore. But so in this test, we're actually passing the full Redux, like the actual Redux provider. It was the same one. There's no mocking here. And it works. You know, the test passes. It's fine. But it's like when you get into more complicated components, you're spending all your time just mocking up your app, just so you can see if a button click does what you want it to do. So we kind of moved away from Enzyme. And I just kept thinking, there are, you know, these apps are really complicated. Can we just test the whole thing really easily? So that's where Detox comes in. And I forgot, so I said there were two classes, two buckets of bugs that we found. One was in data. The second one was actually just UI, like styling issues, where a button would be cropped or it would be out of position. And none of our automated tests would catch that. And it happened a fair amount. And you know, you look at a button that may be cropped or misaligned and you think, well, that's okay. But the reality is in this day and age, native apps have to be 100% and they have to be perfect. There's so many, the expectations on the phone are so high, even things like that can really bring down an app. So let's go Detox. Okay, so I started looking around. You know, I'm not the only one with this problem. How do I test my native app end-to-end, you know, integrated in an automated fashion? And there's a lot of there are other libraries that do that, other test runners and tools. They all had problems, whether they just were buggy or, you know, they all had limitations, or you had to instrument your code in some really cumbersome way, like set up these global props or, you know, or some ID that you pass down through your tree, and you have to touch every single component for it to make it testable. And to be fair, you also have to do that with Detox, but it was the easiest, most compatible instrumentation that I found. So in a nutshell, as you can see with the picture, Detox lets you drive your app using code. That's what we want. That's what we're all talking about. Just real quick, Zach and I were talking beforehand. Detox is built on top of existing native app drivers. So the one for iOS is called Earl Grey. One for Android is called Espresso. They're both Google. Detox just put a JavaScript layer on top of them. So now this sort of testing is super accessible. It's accessible to every JavaScript developer out there, which is really huge. Okay, so let's see it in action. Any questions? Okay, so can you see that? Is it too small, or is it the? What's that? Is it glare? Is it too dark? Oh, okay. That's better. Is it big enough? Okay, where am I? So I'm in the Detox repo itself to have an example React Native app with example tests. I'm just going to run it at first. I think I have to start the packager. Yeah, let's just go into the React Native, go to the README. So Detox starts the app, taps on hello, say hello, taps on world, and exits, and that's it. It's awesome. It's awesome. I didn't do that. I didn't have to touch anything. So what just happened? Let's look at that real quick. This is the test app. It's got 2 links. If you tap on say hello, you go to a screen that says hello. And you can't even go back. You have to reload your app to go back. If you tap on say world, you go to a screen that says hello world. Now, that. Let's look at that test. Yeah, so here's the detox test. Again, this is all out of the Git repo. I haven't done anything yet. I don't want to get into, so detox is, for lack of a better word, kind of brittle right now, but it's still early. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of kind of setup you have to do, and I won't go into all that. What I want to focus on is the actual test. So there's 3 tests. The first one says, hey, I should have a welcome screen. And remember Enzyme when we had a selector and we were selecting elements on the screen? It's kind of the same. The only difference, so this is better though, because we're working on the whole app. We're not working on individual components. So it says, look for the element with the ID of welcome and expect it to be visible. That would be this screen. The second test says, look for the element called hello button and tap it. And then when I tap it, expect an element with a text of hello, exclamation, 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 to be visible. And it is. And then the last test is similar. Look for an element with the ID of world, tap it, and look for text of world to be visible. That is the test. Let's look at the component really quick. I think it's in here. No. App.js. What happened to app? There it is. Okay. So this is the code for this app. Let me reload this. The only thing I want to point out is this test ID. So this is the instrumentation I was talking about before. So so Detox has a library of selectors. Things like has text, of type. In order to avoid the brittleness I talked about before with your app changing all the time, what we decided was to just always use an ID. Use ID as much as possible. And much like on the web, the ID should be unique. It's like unique within your app. And then when you do that, you add this test ID prop to your component, and then Detox can find it. One nice thing is that this test ID prop is actually not a Detox thing. It's I think it's an iOS thing. I think Android has a different prop. It's called something else, but it's in the operating system for accessibility reasons. So Detox is kind of tapping into the accessibility land in order to select these things on screen. So there's not some weird like proprietary prop on all your components. This is actually very just stock iOS stuff. So that's the test. So we're take this a little step further. Detox that's how it works. You select things, you assert that other things are there. It's better, I claim it's better than Enzyme. It still feels like, how do I catch those visual bugs? What happens if those, something changes on the page? But what if like a query actually goes wrong? my assertions pass, but the data is wrong. And what we came to was, what if we could screenshot the entire app and test that the results on the screen are as expected, meaning your data is good, and all the UX on your screen is correct. So that's what we set about doing. It turns out it's pretty easy, at least on Mac for iOS. I have no idea. I should have started out with this. I have no idea if any of this applies to Android, so sorry. Detox supports Android, but I don't know about screenshotting. Let's get into that. So I am into screenshot diffing. Okay, let me run it. This works. Okay. So it ran. One of the changes I made in this branch is that it now generates a screenshot. So let me open that up. So there's our image file on disk, which is just the screen, right? Now, what happens? Let's say we change, let's bump this font size up to 50. So now it looks like that. Rerun this test. See what happens. What? That's not right. Oh, you know what I forgot to do was check in the 2E. So So the particular, and it doesn't have to do it this way. The particular approach we took to taking a screenshot of the app before, taking one after, and diffing them is to just look at Git. So we take a screenshot, we commit it, run the tests, look for, using Git diff, we look for differences. If they are, then we lay them on top of each other and generate a pixel diff image. So look at that, one failed test. And I happen to know that these are placed in this diffs folder. And yeah, so since I forgot to commit it, it didn't work out quite the way I expected. But, so this is interesting. The test failed. It picked up a difference, not the one I expected, which was the enlarged font size. It actually picked up another difference. Does anyone see it? Yeah, the time and the status bar. So, so we took a screenshot, including the time, took another one, the time change. So it's kind of cool, right? Like, so now if anything on screen changes, we'll pick that up automatically. And later I'll get into kind of the caveats of detox, all the gotchas. One of them is the status bar. So that is screenshot diffing. So what happened? Let's do this. GitHub. I want to show you the coding changes, which are not that many. Let's see. And in screenshot diffing. Okay. So on this branch had these changes, which are not a whole bunch. First thing I did was add some helpers, some npm run scripts. I added two. One of them runs a little detox wrapper, which is just some setup and some checks before it runs the actual detox test command, which is this one. Earlier I said we do image diffs. There's an npm command that does that called pixel match, so that's nothing we did. I just installed it and it works great. Let's look at the wrapper. So this is a bash script, which, like I said, detox is still early. It's not super developer friendly. There's a lot of stuff that has to be in place, and the script checks for them. So you need this companion simulator driver library called Apple Simules, and it just checks that that's installed. You need the detox CLI. So detox won't run off your Xcode build. It has its own build, so you need to make sure that, because a lot of time, it used to be developing, build in Xcode, run the test, run the detox test, which points to a build that's like a week old, because it's a totally different one. So this is a check to make sure that you have rebuilt your detox binary along with your actual Xcode binary. Wants to make sure that your simulator devices are all kind of installed. Make sure that your React Native packager is running. Then, once detox is finished, just some bash scripting that runs the git diff, looks for any differences, runs pixel match if there are, dumps all the diffs into a directory. So that is the wrapper. Again, that's pretty straightforward. So what else do we change? So I have this screenshot function, which saves screenshots in a folder based on where the test lives. That's what most of this is about. The interesting line is this one, which is like just part of Xcode. It comes installed with Xcode. You just run xcrun symcontrol IO booted screenshot, and it creates a screenshot. There's no secret there. It's pretty easy. I mean, I didn't do that. I didn't find that either. It was on GitHub. So programming is awesome, except for when it doesn't work. Let's look at the test. So this is the same test we looked at earlier. I added one line, which is to save the screenshot. So again, so the test runs, saves the screenshot, git diff, hey, have any images changed? If so, let's run pixel match and dump the images in some folder for human inspection. So you still need a human at the end of the day to look at the diffs. And that's really it as far as screenshot diffing. I want to, let's run, I was wondering if, so let's run this again. I want to see, yeah. You know what? We don't need to run it again. I was going to try to get the diff that I wanted, but that's okay, because I do want to do some other things. Actually, let's run it real quick. Nah, let's not run it. Okay. Does anyone, who cares? Does anyone want to run this again? No? Okay. All right. Because I want to, now I'm going to run a detox test on our client project, so like kind of real world. I don't know if it'll work because I know that it does fail sometimes, but just so you can see it, I'm going to try it. I have to start a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, let's get rid of that one. Everything running, good. So there's some interesting things, we'll see if this works. So it's booting up our actual app. One major obstacle was logging in, like how do you log in through a test in like a reliable fashion. So there's some code that does that, types in the username, types in the password, waits for a response. We'll see if this works. So I'll let that run. So it's hanging. The reason it's hanging is Detox actually, one of the big things about Detox is that it handles asynchronous things in your app. So a lot of the problems with end-to-end testing is like, how do you account for network requests? How do you account for animations? How do you request for, stuff that happens asynchronously? So they take care of, there's a list of specific things that Detox will wait to happen until your test proceeds. So like network requests is one of them. Animations is another one, and I found it a little buggy. So there's animation on this screen, this carousel that's sliding left and right. And even though, like sometimes it goes forward and sometimes it waits a really long time until, I don't even know what it's waiting for because the animation doesn't change. But it waits a really long time before going forward. It's one of the caveats to Detox. And here we go. So tapped on the login link. Now we're typing in our username and password. It's pretty cool. Now this actually hits the Crossroads auth server, which is pretty flaky. I really hope this works. Does not look like it will work. So eventually Detox will time out. It has a hard-coded timeout limit. I think it's like, it might be a minute, it might be 60 seconds. When that does, oh, there it goes. So all it did was counter this timeout. I wonder, it's gonna work. Nope, no. Well, yeah, that's too bad. So it's not, I had this problem yesterday. The auth server is down or something. Anyway, I'm going to, let's see if that ever logs in. And try it one more time. We'll keep going. What is this? So that's really it. Caveats, things to know, / known issues. What are we at? Let's try here. Like I mentioned before, you need to instrument your code with test IDs. There's just really no way around that. Detox had the best sort of setup for that I found. The status bar. So in real life, actually, if you see this app, we have, in Xcode, we have a Detox scheme. And in that scheme, we just disable the status bar. We just turn it off. So that's never a problem in screenshot diffing. Detox only works on Mocha right now, which is annoying because all our tests run on Jest. So now we have both Mocha and Jest in our project, which annoys the crap out of me. It has issues with the software keyboard, which is this keyboard right here. Sometimes it encounters a screen and it won't open the keyboard when it should be. Just something they're working out. Linear gradients are broken when under detox. And then, obviously, your app is very dynamic, so other parts of the screen may change. What we've been working on recently, which I thought about running, trying to demo it, but it's a little tough. I mean, I couldn't even get the simple demo to work. I didn't want to go there. But we're working on basically the detox tester, our detox test script. Right, our API is totally, it's online, right? It's separate. Our detox script is separate. The app is separate. So we can actually query the API for data. We'll use that data to drive the test to get our app in a predictable state, so that when you log into the dashboard and it says, you know, hello, here's your news feed, we know what that news feed will be, and it won't break our screenshot test. So that's what we're working on right now, and kind of in progress. And yeah, early wins. It's working pretty well. That's the last issue there. And there's probably more. I don't know. This isn't something that's in like our build process yet. It's still very experimental. I would love it to be in our build process one day, so we can push a button. We only have to push a button. You just have to push a commit. Screenshots are diffed. If there's a diff, build fails, a human goes in, looks at it, and says, oh my gosh, this commit broke this screen way over here. And now we know that. And that would be, that's kind of like, that's the goal we're going for. We're not quite there yet. So let me try this one more time. No, it's not going to work. Anyway, that's it. Any questions? It is exactly 10 till. No questions, really? Boring? Terribly complicated? Terribly easy?
Have you had this in place? Okay. Oh, whoa.
There you go.
Have you had this in place long enough to tell if it is finding bugs that would have otherwise not been found, or to be able to tell if it's a lot of like time spent on updating the snapshots that you expected to change?
Right, that's the question I kept going back to. Is this good at catching bugs? To be honest, we only have 2 screenshot tests in the app. They have caught 1 bug. Haven't really had to update them a whole lot. But the bug was legit. Like, I mean, it was a visual thing, right? So we changed something that threw off the padding of a component. So it was kind of like, it was very much a design bug. It was like, oh, this box has too much padding. Like it was very subtle, and it caught it, so we were able to fix that. That's the one that springs to mind. So I'd say it's a little early for that, yeah. Oh, but to the point about updating, in theory it should be easy, because if we say, hey, this diff is okay, all we have to do is commit the screenshot to Git, yeah.
I just have a general question.
Yeah.
Why, so why would this be useful, this particular example, why would this be useful for a user? I mean, is it like maybe to help the user to interact with the phone right away, or how would something like this even be useful, especially if you already have to log in? I would think the login would already be enough for the welcome.
Yeah, so it's not, this isn't really for the end user. Is that what you mean?
Okay, yes.
Yeah, this is purely for development. So this is a way to really ensure software quality. Just one of the many ways to ensure software quality. And one of the many ways you can automatically ensure software quality. Yeah.
So I also had a question too.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit earlier about the actual native frameworks in Swift and Android to do UI testing, and that Detox is just a wrapper around that?
Yeah, as far as I understand.
So I was thinking about it, and so technically this library, Detox, doesn't even really depend on having a React Native app, right? Like, would you be able to test drive a native app using Detox?
Yes, that's a good point. So I think, I'm pretty sure what you said is true. And in fact, actually that was one of the difficulties we ran into, was that we were writing the test and we said, oh, we need this piece of data, like a constant, right? Let's just import the constant. Well, it's not there because we're not in our app, we're outside the app. So I think you're right. The other result of that is that I don't know if this will ever happen. What I'd love to do is take this and separate, extract it into like its own GitHub repo. So you can do screenshot testing on any native app or React Native app, kind of like out of the box. Because this is very coupled with our code right now, which isn't really useful to anyone else. But I'd love to be able to separate it out. Yeah, anyone?
All right, well, thank you, Gerard, for this.
Thanks.
All right, and thank you all again for attending CinciJS this month. Look forward to hopefully seeing you again next month for CinciJS. Thank you.